Hello, boys and girls. Lord Hawkeye here again. Some of you may be saying, hey, Anarchist FAQ, didn't you do this before? Yeah, a real long time ago, and it's probably out of date, and there's a couple points I wanted to elaborate more on it. So, if this is a nice little easy reference to some of the most basic questions you may get about the idea of statelessness, so hopefully this may help a few people better understand it. Anyways, here we go. First, what is anarchism? Anarchism literally means without rulers. It is the belief that governments are neither necessary nor moral. It is the logical conclusion of the non-aggression principle. It espouses self-ownership, voluntarism, and the rejection of illegitimate authority and institutionalized violence. What is the non-aggression principle? The non-aggression principle is the philosophy that the initiation of force is inherently immoral because it is an action which cannot be justified through any kind of logical consistency. It is a universal principle that applies to anyone regardless of race, social status, or religious belief, and regardless of any imaginative labels people try to hide behind, such as, taxation or collateral damage. What exactly defines a government? A government is a group of individuals who claim the monopolistic right within a given region to initiate the use of violence, typically for the claimed purpose of enforcing law and order. Because it both claims to oppose the use of force, yet employs such force itself, it is clearly a contradictory and illogical idea. What is capitalism? Capitalism, at its core, means free trade, the freedom to trade without forceful intervention from uninvolved parties. In other words, if two people wish to trade and both consent, there is no moral argument against such an action regardless of what they trade, where and when they trade, or in what manner they trade. To aggress against parties engaging in voluntary trade would be a violation of the non-aggression principle, and thus capitalism is embraced by anarchism and the non-aggression principle. What is socialism and communism? Socialism and communism are both the ownership of a trade or a particular industry of trade by a government. In other words, trade within a given field is restricted to only those approved of by said government and will aggress against anyone who trade outside their approval. Communism is when said industry is directly owned by the government, while socialism is when certain firms are granted monopoly power over their field by the government. Both ideas, while often claiming otherwise, are incompatible with the non-aggression principle and thus should be morally and logically rejected. Does anarchism reject the use of police, militia, and courts? No, it only rejects the monopolization of such services by a government. Does anarchism advocate letting the poor go without aid? No. Free trade does include the freedom to donate to any cause one deems worthy without interference. It only opposes the forceful seizure of funds for any purpose, including charity. Can people form a communist-style society in anarchism if they want to? Yes, as long as all parties agree. Doesn't anarchism assume that all people are good? No. Anarchism only assumes that people are self-interested and will act accordingly. In a society without institutionalized violence, this necessitates cooperation and peaceful interaction, as the use of force will inevitably bring about undue risk to the perpetrator. How will X be done without a government? That's not up to me to decide. With free trade will come room to experiment with many solutions to a problem that arise, and it will be up to you to decide what solution suits your individual needs best. Won't the rich dominate people without a government? The government already dominate people, and they are comprised entirely of rich people who have the most influence over them, so this question is a non sequitur. Being rich only means you have more capacity to bargain with others. It does not confer any kind of power. Rich people still have to convince people to voluntarily trade with them, as do everyone else. You are free to ostracize any whose practices you do not approve of. How would we deal with criminals without a government? This question assumes that governments properly deal with criminals now. Instead, they increase crime through unneeded regulations that create black markets to exploit. They lock violent people up with other violent people, which only continues to fuel their antisocial behavior. And governments themselves routinely commit acts which are crimes by their own definition. While it's difficult to say exactly how crime will be handled, in short, it will be managed through social ostracism. Those who engage in violence and antisocial behavior will will find their ability to trade with others hindered as people refuse to deal with them. This will be greatly facilitated now that we live in an age where information is so freely available. They will have to either make amends or they will be unable to function in society. See collection agencies for a good example of how this is already practiced. Isn't it violence to ostracize people? No, it is merely stating the conditions upon which one is willing to interact with others, an exercise of freedom of association. Alright, that should cover it for now. If anyone out there has any questions they would like to add or any other topics they'd like me to talk about, please post a comment or send me a private message and I'll take a look and see what I can do. Until then, be aware and be wise.